Fabio, your new book is entitled Al Dente, A History of Italian Food. What inspired you to write this book?
I wanted to write a book about the history of Italian food, first of all because I've been working on the topic for so many years, doing research and teaching, but I wanted also to give a new approach to the topic. I wanted to connect different aspects of Italian food that at times are not looked at together. For instance, at questions of food production and even land ownership throughout history, connected with the history of the landscape, the history of distribution, and then of course the history of cooking, consumption, and in the past few decades, I also look a lot at media and more modern aspects of Italian food. I chose the title Al Dente for my history of Italian food because I think al dente really says a lot about the way we cook, for instance, our pasta. And it's an expression that people all over the world now are associating with food from Italy. Before, as you know, pastas were sometimes very much overcooked. People didn't really know how to cook it properly. Now, as Italian food becomes more popular, people are paying more attention to that. And they're looking at the way Italians prepare their food at home. So I wanted to refer to the fact that, I'm looking at a food tradition that it's present now globally, but it's still very much attached to its tradition, and at the same time it's got its own flavor, its own texture, its own characteristics.
What kinds of changes do you see in Italy as far as food consumption is concerned?
One element that I really underlined throughout the book is that Italian food has been changing since the beginning. Since the arrival of the Greeks in Italy, and then we had the Arabs, and then we had the Normans, and then we have the Spaniards. So Italian food has been evolving all the time. What's happening in the past few years is that probably globalization as a phenomenon is becoming more intense and faster. And Italy is not isolated from what happens in the rest of the world. I think the major changes in Italian diet happened at the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, where finally Italy moved away from poverty into what was called the economic miracle. Very fast growth, people had more money, and suddenly they started shifting from their traditional Mediterranean diet to a diet that includes more meats, more cheese, more fatty foods, more sugar. At the same time, Italians are realizing that they are losing their connection with the Mediterranean diet. So there is ambivalence about all these new ways of eating. We are happy to have access to foods that in the past were only for the richest. But at the same time, we're very worried about our health, about our weight.
What sources did you refer to? You mentioned looking at what archaeologists are discovering about food. What other sources have you used to research these your ideas and to discover what you needed to find?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there is a great amount of academic research that it's usually not available to the general audience. One thing I wanted to do is really to make that interesting material available to anybody. I looked at the landscape. What does the landscape tell me about that place, the history of the place, and the food produced there? I think it's important to read what those landscapes tell us about the past of those people. And then for the past 100 years or so, I've also looked at media, anything from printed material to posters, to movies, to radio shows. So I really wanted to look at a vast array of sources to create this narrative, this story of Italian food going from the beginning to what's happening now.
I find that in some ways Italian Americans hold a lot of these traditional dishes very close to their hearts, Have you investigated that aspect of Italian-American cuisine?
I have actually dedicated a whole chapter to the globalization of Italian cuisine. So it's not just ethnic cuisines coming to Italy, but it's Italians that for decades have left Italy and moved to other places. In a way, they've kept traditions that in Italy are getting lost. And that's a very interesting element. But at the same time, they're also adapting those traditions to the new situation where they are. Sometimes we see dishes that are developed in a different way, I don't know, in the US or in southern Brazil, where there's also a huge Italian community. I think that's a story that really needs to be told. We cannot look at Italian food without considering the diaspora.